Tarris here. I am a health equipment, biotechnology, biohacking researcher who focuses on equipment, devices, protocols, and does the due diligence, does the research on if something is essentially going to be the ROI that you are hoping that it will be. And I consult with practitioners and clinics and everyday people and try to help them to avoid costly investment mistakes. So in this video, just like in my others, I am going to be a lone voice in the wellness field from the perspective that in the case of NanoVi, which we will be going over today in a 27-page presentation, which I will list below you if you want to download it in the description box of the video. You can see it. We'll be calling into question a lot of the claims, investigating those claims, and ultimately the purpose of the video is so that you can say, based on the price that they're charging, depending on the model, and we're talking multi-thousands, it's up there. Is that going to be what I need? Is it going to be worth it? If I have some kind of budget, right? If you got $1 million and you can spend on whatever, then probably disregard the video. But if you're really trying to make decisions on is something going to be better to invest in versus something else, right? Then this is going to be essentially that video. Now, NanoVi is really just like your perfect kind of case study of a company that has followed the path that many other wellness equipment companies have followed before. And it's kind of formulaic at this point, and I've talked about it in a lot of my other videos about how one company comes out and they kind of do the podcast circuit, with some of the biggest influencers and content creators in the wellness and health space. And then they also do the health conference circuit, spend a lot of money offline, basically. In fact, they're going to be at the Biohacking Beyond Biohacking, which is Dave Asprey's sort of health conference. It's a pretty good one. In Austin, I will be there. And they're going to be spending a lot of money, right? And this is how they get their name out there. And the company has done actually pretty well in building a brand recognition. Again, it's a very costly thing to do, and you really got to work at it. But what happens then, and I've noticed, is a lot of companies in this space, they build such a brand recognition, and you start to see them everywhere, that critical thinking tends to go out the window. And I see this again and again and again. And also a little bit of the challenge here is that when you try to learn about, for example, NanoVi, and you go online and you're just poking around, the internet, 99% of that content that you're going to see is going to be pro NanoVi. It's going to be biased towards NanoVi. And really, honestly, to make it very simple, is that not always, but a lot of the time that you're going to see it out there on health summits or podcasts or whatever, there's incentivization happening there. So people can make a lot of money giving it the thumbs up, endorsing it. And if they're not directly getting paid, like as an affiliate or whatever by the company, it still makes for great content, right? And if you're a content creator in the health space, what do you need? You need to always be like on the leading edge of what's the latest and greatest, what's interesting, right? To make content. So they are incentivized also to bring NanoVi on, whoever wants to talk about it from the company or whatever, right? And talk about their experience with it because it makes for good content. But what you'll see is that in a lot of those interviews or whatever the content is, it just tends to all be, they all play nice. And nobody ever really asks like real critical questions because, I don't know. There could be many reasons for that, right? So it is long form video here. So if you have patience, and you should, because if you are actually considering, is this worth investing in? And I just can't remember the cost. Their prices just kept going on. But it used to be like $4,000. Then they have multiple models. So it's like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It keeps going up there in the thousands, depending on the model. If you're thinking about dropping that kind of money, definitely watch it all the way through the end. Download the slideshow here that we'll be going through. It's just hosted on my Google Drive, and I'll grant you permission, then you can download it. Not a big deal. And you can email me also anytime with questions about this. In this video, I will also recommend an alternative inhalation modality known as hydrogen inhalation. And that, in my opinion, based on the actual published research, is significantly superior in terms of the value proposition. And part of the reason for that is that in the field of hydrogen-rich water and inhalation, which there's now well over 1,600 very impressive studies, I might add, done all over the world, it's part of the advantage there for the consumer is that many scientists and researchers and organizations and institutions have been researching it, and it hasn't been under just one device. So we've now got this value of a huge, rich amount of research about that therapeutic intervention, where in the case of NanoVi, the whole struggle that they've had is, hey, we're a small company. They're definitely bigger now. But for a while there, it's like you have a lot of investment in building your device. And, again, there's just a lot of money they've had to put out. And how much money can they really put into research, right? Proving what it actually can do. And that's the challenge. If they wanted to kind of somehow go more in the direction of hydrogen, they would have to give away all their proprietary information to a certain extent and say, here, scientific community, here's what we're creating. You can create it too. And let's all together, right, investigate this type of therapeutic intervention and see what we all find. You get what I'm saying? But they're trying to sell a product, right, with patents and trademarks. And so they're going to be then incredibly challenged as they have very, very slow to progress in actually proving efficacy. So that's what we're actually going to pick apart today. And by the way, I've been in the hydrogen space and many other product categories for quite some time. I've really been in the hydrogen space in the United States since the beginning, last 15 years. I've seen every single product come to market. I love the modality. If you have any questions about that, just let me know. But let's dive into, the actual modality we'll be reviewing today. And the company up here in the right-hand corner, you see that up there? That's actually the corporate or the company name, Eng3. I say Eng3. And then the device that we'll actually be reviewing here is NanoVi. All right. All right, so the last many years, since this first came out, I had an opportunity to become a dealer. I'm a dealer, distributor for a large vetted network of manufacturers, maybe 80 plus, that I feel are worth it. I never quite took the plunge into NanoVi because of both the cost and because I was not very impressed by the proven claims and or benefits compared to other things that were out there. So in this presentation, again, it's designed for practitioners, clinic owners, basically anyone wanting to make evidence-based decisions about wellness technologies. So really, we're going to try to take a critical, balanced look at the therapeutic claims, the mechanism of action, quality of the evidence, and essentially what it means for a clinical or at-home investment decision. So this is strictly for educational purposes, not making any treatment claims. Again, what we're going to be doing is decision support based on available evidence. So let's dive on in to second slide here. So why are we doing the deep dive? The reality is that people are asking about NanoVi. All right, it's coming up in recovery protocols. We're seeing it all out and about there in the world. So we really need to prevent marketing overreach is what I've seen constantly in this wellness industry, online and offline. And we got to stay aligned with medical ethics and regulatory standards. We need to evaluate the mechanism if it's plausible from a biological standpoint. We also need to assess the actual strength of the evidence, not just the marketing claims. And I really try to do that in a lot of my videos. And we also need a clear picture of the practical ROI and risk management considerations for clinics. So it's really about making an informed, responsible decision in an era really where wellness technologies are proliferating faster than evidence can keep up. And that's why we'll be going to the Beyond Biohacking conference here in Austin at the end of this month, because there's just a really lot of, it just attracts a lot of great companies. And I'm going to try something new, and I will actually be making videos and doing a little bit more like interview style to those who have booths or exhibitors there about certain modalities that pique my interest. And I'll be posting those on my YouTube channel. So make sure to like and subscribe. And if you can't make the show, because we all have busy lifestyles, then I'm going to probably start to do that a little bit more often. So you can kind of just see my interview. And as I do more due diligence on something as well, I'll do some follow-up videos on the companies that I discover. So anyways, let's start with the basics. What exactly is NanoVi, and what does the company claim that it does? So the device emits specific infrared radiation into humidified air. You breathe this treated air through a nasal cannula, similar to oxygen therapy, or similar to actually inhaling hydrogen, as I mentioned before. But it's not delivering concentrated oxygen, just to be clear. It's regular room air at about 21% oxygen. Obviously got some nitrogen in there and whatnot. So according to Eng3, this process supports protein folding, protects against oxidative stress damage, enhances cellular repair and resilience, and improves both performance and recovery. They offer 3 models: the Eco, the Pro, and the Exo. The main difference is the power output, if you were wondering. The Exo is the most powerful, which means you get the equivalent effects in shorter session times. So again, it's about efficiency. Their safety positioning is important. They market this as a non-pharmacological, supportive of your body's natural processes, not overriding them. And that's a key regulatory and clinical distinction. You can definitely find more information about it on Eng3Corp.com. I'll put it below in the description of the video. And you can also check it on their FAQ pages. So we'll talk about the mechanism, because this is where it gets interesting from a biophysics perspective. And if you've been following me for a bit, I love biophysics. So I'm always trying to look for modalities that are a little bit more interesting on that kind of level of biology. So here's the proposed chain of events that the company says. Infrared radiation hits humidified water droplets in the air, creating what they call coherent humidity, abbreviated as COHU. This coherent humidity is supposed to promote the formation of ordered water, also called exclusion zone water, or easy water. And that term was really more coined by Gerald Pollack. I'll spell the last name for you, Pollack. You can look him up. You can find lots of interviews with him on YouTube, by the way, if you just kind of want to dive into what he does. He also created that book, or wrote the book, The Fourth Phase of Water. Maybe you heard about that. And did big tour all over the place for many years, talking about this research that they found in the labs with easy water. And there really hasn't been like any product applications, I guess you could say, in the health space that really got anywhere until this company started to kind of reference easy water, claiming that this was kind of involved in what they were doing. Anyways, so this exclusion zone water at the interface of proteins inside of your cells, that ordered water, when supports correct protein folding, better protein folding means improved protein function. And improved protein function leads to system level effects, better redox balance, enhanced cellular repair, and increased resilience. That is the claim. Now, this isn't complete pseudoscience. There is a legitimate research on exclusion zone water and protein folding, as I mentioned with Gerald Pollack and just a bunch of different researchers on his team, and then also elsewhere in the world. Protein folding is absolutely fundamental to cellular health, and there's lots of research on that, of course, independently out there in the world of science. And when proteins misfold, we see disease. There's a lot of great research on that, all the different side effects basically it can cause, including just things like aging. So the mechanism has plausibility of what they're claiming, but, and this is crucial, plausibility is not the same as proof. We need to keep that distinction crystal clear as we evaluate the evidence. So, go to my next slide here. Let's start with the strongest evidence the company has, which comes from laboratory studies. They have published in vitro enzyme studies that test tube work, not human studies, showing that coherent humidity can protect enzyme activity or restore it after damage from heat oxidation or chemical denaturance. From a mechanistic standpoint, this is actually compelling. It provides real measurable evidence that this water irradiation approach affects protein folding and function in controlled laboratory conditions. These aren't just theoretical benefits, they're showing actual changes in enzyme activity. But, and this is absolutely critical, these are benchtop results. They're not clinical outcomes in actual patients. The leap from this works in a test tube to this will improve your health is a massive gap that requires rigorous human research to bridge. So if you're wondering like where you can read some of that, you can go check out their oxidative stress study summary at Eng3Corp.com. So let's get into the specifics of that key protein study so you can understand exactly what was tested. The study focus was enzyme activity after various types of damage, heat oxidation, and chemical denaturance. They tested 3 proteins, peroxidase, catalase, and alkaline phosphatase, all enzymes that play important roles in the body. The design included treatment before and or after damage, with controls including an inactivated device where the infrared units were switched off. This is good methodology, of course. It helps ensure that we're seeing real effects from the technology, not just placebo or humidity alone. And the outcomes were measured, enzyme activity compared to both undamaged and damaged controls. So here are some selected findings reported by Eng3. Peroxidase, 35% increase when treated before oxidation, 32% increase after, compared to the oxidized control group. Alkaline phosphatase activity recovered to 36% of intact levels after oxidation, about 1.5 times the untreated control. Catalase, significant post-damage effects in several conditions. These are real measurable effects, but remember, this is in vitro. Let's be very clear about what this protein study supports and what it does not prove. On the support side, yes, the water irradiation approach can influence protein activity in vitro. Yes, coherent humidity may stabilize protein folding after damage in laboratory conditions. But here's what it does not prove. Clinical efficacy in humans for actual health outcomes, long-term benefits or disease modification, dose-response relationships in living organisms, superiority versus standard care. The limitations are important. This was a benchtop setup using humidity as an intermediary. We don't have direct human mechanistic readouts. We don't know if these same effects occur inside actual cells, in actual bodies, under actual physiological conditions. This is a critical distinction for practitioners. In vitro promise does not equal clinical proof. Now let's talk about the water science because this is really the foundation of the entire mechanism. According to the company materials, they've documented changes in several physiochemical water properties, redox potential, surface tension, dielectric properties, and pH buffering capacity. Their hypothesis is that these changes support the formation of easy or ordered water adjacent to proteins. But here's our first major evidence gap. The company reports these findings, but there's limited peer-reviewed external corroboration shown on their website. Most of what we're seeing is mechanistic rationale. It makes sense theoretically, but we're not seeing independent labs replicating these water property changes. There's an article on their site called The Water Science Behind NanoVi. On their articles and media, page 2, that go into more detail. I'd encourage you to go read it critically. Ask, who funded this research? Has it been independently replicated? What's the quality of the methodology? This is the hypothesis generating work, not yet hypothesis confirming work. And by the way, guys, if you have any questions or comments or just anything, as it just pops up for you, just pause the video and then just go down and just post in the comments. I'd be happy to respond there. Anyways, on our next slide here's why the easy water concept is both the linchpin of this technology and a significant risk. The entire mechanism depends on ordered or exclusion zone water enhancing protein function. If that relationship doesn't hold up in vivo, or if the device doesn't actually create meaningful amounts of easy water inside cells, the whole mechanism falls apart. And here's the problem. Easy water remains debated outside of the Eng3 ecosystem and the Pollock Research Group. There's a real risk of over-extrapolation, taking laboratory observations of water structure and assuming they translate directly into robust clinical effects. There's also a sensitivity issue. Even if small physiochemical shifts in water properties are real, they may not translate into measurable health benefits in complex living systems where thousands of other factors are at play. I think this is a good hypothesis generating foundation. The science is interesting, but it absolutely requires in vivo confirmation in actual living organisms, preferably humans, but I'll take mice as a next good step. Basically, we really need to see, though, in mammals, showing these mechanisms operate the way the company thinks they do. All right, let's shift to the human evidence, because that's what really matters for clinical decision making and investments. The company cites several types of evidence. Company reported blinded athlete studies, though these are unpublished data sets. Pilot and observational metrics like HRV, VO2, oxygen utilization, cerebral blood flow, testimonials, podcast appearances, and case uses at various wellness centers. But here are the key limitations we need to acknowledge. Very few peer-reviewed human RCTs accessible on their website, limited independent replication, and very limited raw data access. There's a big potential for bias and placebo effects, especially with subjective improvements or biomarkers. The bottom line is the human evidence packaged is thin compared to what we'd want to see before making strong clinical claims. This is early stage exploratory stuff, not definitive proof. And I would also add, just regards to the placebo point, I'm probably going to make another video on this because, I'm really I'm really passionate and interested, right, in all these different wellness technologies and products and tools. I've been at it a long time. But there's more and more interesting research and studies showing the powerful effects of people's mind and emotions. They're kind of synonymous. They are one and the same thing. But anyways, and how that really has just this dramatic effect on biology, essentially. The old mind over matter. A group eating the best premium organic food, right? And getting all these results. And then a group being just told that they're eating the best food, but really it's like the worst food and getting the same results. I could go on and on and on. And it really you start to wonder, like, with really great marketing, incredible people endorsing your product with big reputations, that seem to be very much more educated than you. You have to realize that there's constant reinforcement in the form of marketing, positive reinforcement, that something will work. There's multiple tiers of it. From when you first learn about something to when you're actually booking sessions or when you're buying something and you're investing in it. Your mind and emotion play a big, big, big role in the outcomes of something. So I just want to kind of share that piece. All right. Slide 11, make sure I don't lose my place here. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. There's a study the company describes as being conducted at the University of Vienna with 21 athletes in a double-blind crossover, placebo-controlled design. The claimed outcome was reduced lactate accumulation during graded exercise compared to placebo, which, by the way, hydrogen has that study as well. Can't help myself plugging hydrogen. Anyways, so that's actually an impressive study designed on paper. Double-blind crossover, right? Placebo-controlled, all good methodological features. But here's the problem. This is company described. So I really couldn't find a link to the actual peer-reviewed publication on the website. So that means we can't evaluate the full methodology. We can't see the raw data. We can't check for conflicts of interest. And we can't see if results have been independently replicated. So from like an evidence tier perspective, it's promising, but unpublished. We need the actual data set and external replication before drawing strong conclusions. That is just so fundamentally basic. to me, it's a red flag. Honestly, once you start to look really at studies enough on everything from supplements to you name it, yeah, you should just be, you should basically just throw it out the window, to be honest, until it's no longer a big question mark and they're more willing. And I just have to why are they not willing to share, to be more transparent? You know what I mean? That's what I really ultimately wonder about. Anyways, so same story with the immune response study. The company describes research showing changes in white blood cell subsets, leukocyte populations after high-intensity exercise with NanoVi compared to control or sham conditions. The reported outcome was favorable modulation of immune response to stress. Again, this is summary level information. We don't have peer-reviewed publication details available on the site. And evidence tier perspective is preliminary, needs publication and independent confirmation. So look, I'm not saying these studies didn't happen or that results aren't fabricated. I'm saying that without access to full publications and independent replication, we have to treat these as preliminary findings, not established facts. I know it's really hard, to not get excited. Believe me, I am also the person that gets excited when I learn about something, because that's what keeps me going, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, what's this? Sounds so cool, let me look into it, right? Believe me, I'm excited about everything, when it comes out. So I want it to all be true. I got to tell you guys, I am absolutely biased. I want it all to be true, but that's not my job. When people come to me and they're like, I have $100,000 budget, for this clinic and I need to get these outcomes. They have to happen, for this set of conditions or these health goals, yeah, you know what I mean? I need to be just a little more critical in terms of, okay, if you do this, this, and this, we will absolutely be 100% confident you're going to get these outcomes, right? In this type of population, these types of people. So anyways, so let's talk about one of the bigger claims, reduction of double-strand DNA breakage. This is a claim you'll find on their website, and if true, it would be significant. DNA damage, especially double-strand breaks, is a major driver of aging and disease. But here's where the evidence stands. The support they show publicly is indirect. It's based on protein repair mechanisms and oxidative stress reduction, not direct measurement of DNA breaks. I couldn't find human evidence in the form of peer-reviewed RCTs that actually measure DNA damage markers. If you're going to make a DNA damage claim, you need direct human assays, things like gamma H2AX staining or COMET assays. In controlled trials showing DNA breaks are actually reduced. So evidence tier perspective, hypothesis generating, the mechanism could plausibly reduce DNA damage, but we need direct proof in humans. And you'll find more evidence for DNA types of protection, things like that with hydrogen and some other things out there. One little factoid before we move to the next slide, because I maybe you haven't seen my videos before and nobody ever hears all the important things I have to say. But guys, PEMF, you got to watch out for. PEMF, super trendy. That stands for pulsed electromagnetic frequency. There's lots of devices out there. It's been around for decades. Anyways, there's independent organizations that are responsible for doing studies on every type of consumer product, medical devices around irradiation, non-ionizing irradiation, and measuring and also enforcing guidelines to manufacturers as far as what's safe, what's not safe. So like an MRI machine, right? We don't want it to melt your brain, right? So that would be like an example, and they would have to have done their due diligence on that at some point and come out with guidelines, and you get the idea, right? If you actually look at their recommendations around that type of electromagnetic radiation levels, you'll see that a majority of PEMF will run the risk of not just being carcinogenic, but inducing DNA damage and breaks. That's right. Not even the high Gauss ones, which are trendy. Not even those ones. Those definitely do it. But I'm saying even the mid-level and even some of the lower level ones. So you really got to watch out. There's a lot more I talk about in some of my PEMF videos. I just wanted to throw that in here because, hey, if you're looking into this machine, it's very likely if you're listening to this, you probably have heard of PEMF, you know what I mean? as more of like an energy medicine sort of thing, where actually NanoVi kind of fits in that niche as well. So I just kind of want to share because it is actually really, really important, and it's a gray area. So you do actually, let me just bring up this point that there are really things out there that even though lots of people endorse them, that seem to be very reputable, may even seem to be more educated than you, you still have to do your own due diligence. Just because they gave their thumbs up, I'll tell you, a lot of times they're incentivized in some way, and they really actually even haven't done their own due diligence, and there are risks, and you may not realize you're part of some unofficial study to see if maybe you'll get cancer in 15 years, and good luck suing, whatever company and proving that. There's a lot of things out there where there's actually a gray unknown area if it's going to cause problems or not, even if it's very popular, whatever that is, that thing that people are doing. So it's crazy, honestly. It's crazy what I've seen out there in the industry. And I am honestly, I'm one of the few people making content in the entire internet who brings up concerns like this, or concerns about, by the way, there is actually legitimately some safe PEMF out there. Just want to throw that out there. So, but a lot of it you do have to watch out for. All right, moving on to slide 14 here. Remember, there's 27 slides. So if you need to take a little pause and take a bathroom break, we're almost there. I'm moving as fast as I can. What about the antioxidant redox claims that they make? And guys, I love the topic of redox. It's so fascinating. And there are some really good things out there that do really make a difference on that level. Anyways, the company claims NanoVi strengthens antioxidant defenses, supports immune response, and improves redox balance. The support comes from the in vitro enzyme protection study that they were doing, and recovery studies we discussed earlier, plus the mechanistic rationale involving ordered water and protein function. There is some human evidence, but it's observational and company reported with limited independent peer review. So evidence tier is, I'd say, moderate mechanistic plausibility, but low to moderate clinical confirmation. We have a reasonable hypothesis and some supportive lab data, but we're still waiting for the robust human trials as far as the antioxidant redox claims. But as I hinted at, there is a couple modalities out there that do truly have a proven impact on redox function. So heart rate variability, or HRV, is another major claim. The company claims improvements in HRV and autonomic nervous system balance. And guys, if you haven't gotten into this area of research, just HRV in general, and looked into modalities to offer these benefits for yourself or others for autonomic nervous system, this is very, very important when it comes to not just optimization, but treating disease and all kinds of stuff. So this is really, really important stuff to look into. But as far as this product goes, and their claims around HRV, they cite observational readings and pilot results. Their FAQ lists HRV among the indicators they've measured. But there's a gap. We don't have peer-reviewed RCTs showing durable HRV changes versus a sham device in well-defined target populations. HRV is notoriously sensitive to all kinds of factors: stress, sleep, breathing patterns, expectations, mental expectations. Honestly, it's tricky to do it right. So you really need sham-controlled blinded studies to separate real effects from noise. So evidence tier is observational, requires controlled replication. And I just will add about HRV devices out there. There is a lot of bullshit HRV devices out there. There's also a lot of good, very simple wearables that can give you some indicators. And the bullshit ones, FYI, are kind of some of them that, you'll do an HRV reading. And some of these are about like multi-$1,000 devices, by the way. And they, from that one HRV reading, they will give you all kinds of data, like all kinds of stuff. It's just pages of data, of insights, about like what's going on with you. And just let me tell you, a very small percentage of that data you'll get back could be legitimate, especially if you track it over time, consistently look for trends, But the majority of all that extra data is bogus. All you got to do is say like, hey, it told me, this was going on with me. Can you guys prove like how the HRV was correlated to that insight, that health insight that it's giving me in the software? Can you like walk me through that? How it's able to do that? So these companies are having a hard time proving that their HRV device can actually give all the data that it claims it can. So I'll just leave it at that. It's not totally worthless, by the way. That's not what I'm saying. But I think you get what I'm saying. If you have any questions, obviously leave below in the comments. All right, now here's where things get really interesting and also really concerning from an evidence perspective. In recent podcast content, including an interview with Dave Asprey, they've reported some dramatic numbers. And they've reported these numbers, by the way, on other podcasts well and all over the place, anywhere they can really from a marketing perspective. So they've reported 7.8 increase in VO2 max after a single 20-minute session, 11% increase in oxygen utilization, 9% increase in prefrontal cortex oxygen metabolism, and a 12% increase in cerebral blood flow. If those numbers are real and durable, that's game-changing. A 7.8% VO2 max improvement is roughly what you'd expect from months of serious aerobic training. But these are pilot and observational metrics. The peer-reviewed publication details aren't linked on the website. We don't know sample size, blinding procedures, control conditions, or durability of effects. Evidence tier is preliminary. We absolutely need blinded randomized trials with published data sets before we can take these numbers seriously. If you guys are interested in those metrics, though, like increasing oxygen utilization, the prefrontal stuff, blood flow, VO2, I do know there are some modalities that actually really can produce impressive results like that are actually proven. There's only one specific brand of PMF. Also, there is one exercise with oxygen training system that is totally awesome for all of those things that this company is claiming. And they go beyond EWAT, by the way, with something called the adaptive contrast system. If you want to get really good price on LibO2, that's the system that I'm talking about. And that actually is capable of doing all those things. And there's a couple other things out there too, but you can just contact me. And so there's some things that really like stack together well in a sequence. So if you do one modality ahead of doing the adaptive contrast or the EWAT, and then you do something afterwards, like there's a sequence, and it can amplify the results even more so. So why downstream biomarkers are not enough? And this is a really important thing to kind of chat about because this does represent, they use this a lot in their marketing. And remember, a lot of that marketing is for justifying their price points, right? This thing is not $500. If it was $500, to be honest, even after the end of my presentation, I probably would say, if you got money, just go for it, just buy it. Literally. I definitely do not think it's going to harm you in any way, but I'd say, hey, for $500, just like give it a shot. You know what I mean? And just see if you notice anything over time. But it's obviously way beyond that price point wise. So it brings me to a really important point. Why downstream biomarkers alone are not enough. Metrics like HRV, VO2 max, and lactate are all sensitive to placebo effects, protocol variations, and learning effects. If you tell someone they're getting cutting-edge biohacking treatment, their performance might improve from expectation alone. If you're doing an exercise test for the second time, you might perform better just from familiarity. This is what I was hinting at before with placebo and other things. This has a dramatic effect. In fact, it's so dramatic that if you're a business or just doing things on your own, like you almost have to train or coach the people that you're working with on a whole other level mentally and emotionally, because it really will have actually dramatic effects on what you see physiologically. So you got to go, if you want the best outcomes, you really do have to go above and beyond just seeking out the best in class physiological modalities, if that makes sense. Because again, they can have such a big impact. So this is back to my point. This is the specificity problem. Many different interventions can change the measures that I mentioned before. They're not unique to any particular mechanism. That's why we need sham-controlled, blinded, pre-registered trials with clinical endpoints, not just biomarkers, but actual health outcomes. And we need to see dose-response relationships and durability. Does it last? Does more treatment equal more benefit? Without the rigor, we're just guessing. Now, again, these are really important points from the perspective of I have a limited budget, or I'm going to spend a lot of money, thousands, right? Is there going to be something better? Should I or not invest in this thing? Again, if it was $500, my points are still valid, but just go for it, right? It's not a big deal. It's $500. So anyways, moving on. There we go. Got a little slide trouble here. Okay. So to be fair, the company does describe some studies with good methodological features. They mentioned blinded, crossover, placebo-controlled exercise studies. That's directionally positive. It shows they understand the importance of rigorous research design. The next step, and this is crucial, is peer-reviewed publication with full protocols and transparent data sharing. Let independent researchers evaluate the methodology. Let other labs try to replicate the findings. That's how science builds confidence, not through proprietary data and marketing summaries, but through transparent, replicable research. This is why hydrogen is so far ahead because of all those points I just listed. They're looking at it constantly all over the world for many, many, many years now. And the findings are like jaw-dropping. Anyways, so even acknowledging that some blinded studies have been conducted, why does skepticism remain? First, there are very few independent peer-reviewed human studies accessible on their website. Most of what we're seeing is company reported. Second, we're not seeing replication across different labs and different populations. That's a red flag in any field or research. Third, there are ongoing mechanistic debates, particularly around easy water, and risks of overgeneralizing from limited data. And fourth, we need pre-registered trials. Pre-registration means you declare your methods and hypotheses before you collect data, which prevents cherry-picking results. And we need clear adverse event reporting. These are just basic standards of evidence-based medicine, and we're not quite there yet with NanoVi. And by the way, cherry-picking results, not pre-registering. This is still a problem in published research in journals. They still find ways, even if they're doing pre-registration properly with their trials, they're still finding ways to cherry pick data. And we don't even have to go down that road. But oh my God, even there's all kinds of problems, even with the full published studies out there in journals. Anyways, such a challenge to research this stuff. But anyways, moving on. So let me give you a framework for thinking about different types of evidence. At the top tier, we have direct evidence, right? Peer-reviewed, randomized, controlled trials with clinically meaningful endpoints and fully shared data. This is the gold standard. In the middle tier, we have inferred evidence. That's in vitro enzyme recovery, pilot biomarker shifts, mechanistic plausibility. This is suggestive but not conclusive. At the bottom tier, we have marketing extrapolation, testimonials, non-peer-reviewed claims, conference demonstrations. This is the weakest form of evidence. Right now, NanoVi lives mostly in that middle tier. We have some interesting mechanistic data and pilot results, but we need to move those claims up to the direct evidence tier through rigorous human trials. The goal isn't to dismiss the technology, it's to demand the level of proof that matches the claims being made. So what are the biggest evidence gaps? What we do need to see before this becomes a strong clinical recommendation is we need independent peer-reviewed human RCTs versus sham controls. Dose response and time response curves. Does the Eco, Pro, and Exo deliver proportional benefits? Do longer sessions equal better results? We literally don't know that. So if you're going to spend a few thousand more on an Exo, how are you going to justify that? Protocol standardization and pre-registration of trials, long-term outcomes and durability data. Does this work after months and years, not just after one session? Population specificity. Does it work the same in elite athletes, people with chronic fatigue, healthy aging results, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Mechanistic in vivo markers. Can we actually measure proteostasis, DNA damage markers like gamma H2AX, redox panels in human tissues? raw data availability, and replication across independent research sites. Those are the gaps. They're not insurmountable, but they need to be addressed. All right, let's get a little practical here. So I've created a scorecard evaluating NanoVi across 9 different categories, scored from 0 to 5, where 5 is very strong and 0 is very weak. Here's how it breaks down. Direct lab mechanistic evidence, 4 out of 5. The enzyme recovery and water property effects are well documented in laboratory settings. Very cool. Direct in vivo mechanism evidence, 1 out of 5. We haven't demonstrated these mechanisms actually operate in living humans. Human biomarker evidence, 3 out of 5. There's supportive data, but it's not specific to the proposed mechanism. Control and sham quality, 3 out of 5. Some blinded studies are claimed, which is good, but we need to see full publications. Transparency of methods, 2 out of 5. We're getting company summaries, not full data sets and method sections. Independent replication, 2 out of 5. Limited evidence of independent labs confirming findings. Specificity to proposed mechanisms, 1 out of 5. Downstream markers like HRV and VO2 aren't unique to this intervention. Clinical relevance, 2 out of 5. We're measuring biomarkers, not actual clinical endpoints like disease prevention or functional improvement. Risk of marketing overreach, high concerns, 4 out of 5. Real risk of extrapolating beyond what data supports. Overall, mixed picture, strong mechanistic foundation, but weak clinical proof. So if you're running a clinic and considering NanoVi as an equipment investment, here's how I think about opportunities and risks. Opportunities, new revenue stream, upsell, in your recovery and longevity packages. Short session stacking with other services, so it's efficient. Perceived innovation and enhancing the clinic brand. The risks are evidence maturity may limit medical claims and payer adoption. Dependence on marketing and patient expectations. Introduces placebo confounding. Practical steps if you're considering this. Run a pilot program with carefully tracked outcomes. Define your KPIs up front. What are you actually measuring? Use informed consent language. Make sure patients understand this is not an FDA-approved medical device for treatment of disease. Avoid disease claims. You can talk about wellness optimization, recovery report, but stay away from saying it treats or cures specific conditions. Consider partnering with an IRB or setting up registry for real-world data collection. That way you're contributing to evidence-based, not just consuming marketing materials. So let's bring it home. What we know, compelling in vitro data, coherent mechanistic hypothesis, encouraging pilot metrics from users and practitioners. What we don't know, robust peer-reviewed human outcome studies, durability, do effects last over time, independent replication across different research groups. How should you position this? I think the most intellectually honest approach is to consider NanoVi as a potential adjunctive, low-risk modality within a careful monitored program. It's not a replacement for evidence-based interventions, but might be worth exploring, but really kind of depends on your budget. My recommendation, if you're interested, maybe proceed via structured pilot, with rigorous data capturing, track objective outcomes, request publications and full protocols from the company, if possible. Ask hard questions, just like any company, which is I kind of always harp on that point. Just ask the hard questions, because all the different influencers and health educators out there, they don't do it. I'm the only one. So you could be the only one also. But just consider that a lot of these companies, they don't answer those hard questions. So that's why I usually don't have anything to say on my videos. When I ask a lot of these questions to these companies, they just never give me good answers, so I never really talk about it on video. Anyways, key is just demanding transparency, before you write that check for several $1,000s. So anything else here we want to talk about? Not just my citations, if you want to look up each of these articles and studies and things like that. It's all on these pages of the slides. Okay. Important note is where studies are described by the company without linked peer-reviewed publications, they are treated as preliminary in this analysis. That's the appropriate scientific stance until we see full publication and independent replication. So I think that's about it. I hope this gave you a clear, balanced framework for evaluating NanoVi or really any emerging wellness technology. The bottom line, intriguing mechanism, interesting preliminary data, but we need much stronger clinical evidence before this becomes a standard recommendation. And, I'm a little surprised. I think this company has done well. I think they've made a lot of money. And, my critique right now is pretty much would have been just about exactly the same when they just came out in the first couple years. So with all that money made, they haven't really done much to improve on these points that I've critiqued. But I really don't know how the company is truly doing. Maybe they're not doing well financially. I don't know. Maybe they're really struggling and they don't have any money to put into things. But I will just tell you that I do know for a fact a lot of other companies out there where I give strong critiques like this. There's many companies out there that are just crushing it and they're making a ton of money in different product categories, and they have like almost no research at all, and they back up like almost none of their claims at all. Even though they have plenty of money if they wanted to. And really, there's just a new standard. That's what I've seen with like companies. They come to market and they sell their products and make a bunch of money. And if consumers or influencers, health educators, practitioners, whatever, they don't ask them questions. They're not getting asked questions. They're not going to put in more work to prove anything to anybody if nobody's demanding it. And that's what I'm kind of seeing is the problem. So these companies are just like, whatever. We'll just make our marketing claims, and what should we charge? $12,000, $5,000, $8,000? Well, what about $9,450? And literally that's the conversation, and that's how it is, right? And if that's what the consumers are willing to pay, that's what they're willing to pay, and great, everybody's happy. So if you found this helpful, give this video a like and subscribe for more evidence-based breakdowns of health and performance technologies. Just drop a comment below if you have any experience with NanoVi, or you can email me anytime about your experience. I am always curious, and I always truly want to learn, hear from, especially if you're a practitioner using this technology, or any other technologies for that matter. Or just, patient perspectives. I gather research and I do due diligence in a wide variety of ways. And, I'm not opposed to hearing testimonials. And especially, though, I love hearing from practitioners because they've tried so many different modalities a lot of times, or they know their protocols inside and out. You know what I mean? They know them really well. And so when they bring in a new modality and if they see changes with their existing outcomes that they're usually used to seeing certain standards with their outcomes that they're doing, and then that changes, it's sometimes more interesting and insightful. So I don't throw out that data. I don't want you guys to think like I'm all about clinical research data and that's the only thing that I care about at all. I actually pay attention to any feedback that I can get my hands on. So yeah, please do share with me. And as I shared with you my conclusion before, for the price that NanoVi is charging, I would not suggest investing in it. I would have other suggestions of different types of equipment and modalities that actually can give you the same and a lot of additional benefits that NanoVi is claiming. The other thing that I just want to say before I go, which is interesting, is with regards to infrared and specific infrared wavelength being the main way they're creating the structuring in the water vapor, which comes out again of Gerald Pollack's research and some of his other lab people. That near infrared and other wavelengths and the field of photobiomodulation therapy research with 6,000 plus studies, there could be a lot of solid hypothesis and maybe even some evidence that sending near infrared wavelengths, so photobiomodulation, and even red, may actually be having an effect on the water in the body. So if infrared is changing water inside of a test tube or something else holding it, and the way, again, that infrared interacts with the water. And that's all laid out by Gerald Pollack and the rest of his research team. That's creating that easy water and other properties. It's a pretty strong hypothesis there that when you're sending infrared into the water, and again, we know infrared wavelengths, they go right into tissues. We know actually that peak wavelengths, what those are, and that those specifically delivered wavelengths interact with water in the body and with other tissue types in the body, like in the membrane of cells. All that is already researched and very clearly laid out in clinical research. There's some strong information there that sending specific infrared wavelengths into the body is definitely acting on the water. But the hypothesis would be, is it creating that easy easy water inside of the body? We know it's interacting with the water, but the hypothesis right now in that field is we're not 100% sure if it's doing that easy water effect as what we're seeing in the test tubes. But there's already enough photobiomodulation research where we know that the certain peak wavelengths of infrared, because of the way it is it is interacting with water outside of cells and inside of cells, that it is having a certain what they call photochemical signaling response, if that makes any sense. So we have laid out actually that does have tremendous benefits to the body. We do know what enzymes it's affecting, and we do know that water absolutely plays a role in the waveguide of specific infrared wavelengths. Does that make sense? So I just want to throw it out there. So if you were interested in a product category that has a tremendous amount of research, 6,000 plus studies, clinical research studies, tons peer reviewed all over the place for decades, that would be photobiomodulation therapy, specific red and specific near infrared wavelengths delivered in certain ways to the body. That is already out there. We already have clear information on how water plays a role in that entire process and what happens in the body. So if you wanted to pivot, for example, and this is just like, I have other suggestions as well. You can reach out to me and email me. You'll see my email below in the description box of the video. That might be something to pivot to, where we know 100% the effects and we know how it works in the body, which is very crucial, right? Before you invest in something. Because in the field of photobiomodulation, depending on what you're trying to treat, you could spend $400 or even $150. And you could also spend $150,000. It is truly that range, depending on the device, depending on the administration method, what type of photobiomodulation device we're talking about. And I deal with it all, by the way. So it really is that range, all the way like down there to beyond six figures. So if you want to have a chat about that, let me know. And thanks for hanging in there. If you made it all the way to the end of my video, this is truly long form content. Make sure to like and subscribe on your way out.